We are here with Davis Guggenheim, the director of Still, a Michael J. Fox movie coming to Apple TV+. Thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, it's fun to be here. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the magic of Michael J. Fox, maybe for like an 18 to 24-year-old who's maybe turned on Apple TV+ and maybe doesn't know his full story and his full impact from the 1980s. Talk a little bit about that magic that was Michael J. Fox in his heyday.
Well, movie stars now are, over here and over there. In the 80s, when you had a movie star, it was like, this is the one, because there's only one movie to watch, there's only one TV show to watch. And in that moment, when he was in Back to the Future, #1 movie of the year, Teen Wolf, #2 movie of the year, and he's in Family Ties, the lead of the most popular TV show, he was just everywhere. But there's also something else, which is he was just a guy. He's a guy's guy, super funny, super likable, like every man.
And everybody liked him. I mean, that was the one thing, too, with Family Ties, is that he was a Republican on the show, but his parents and his family had different point of views, but you saw everybody getting along and everybody supporting each other. And I think that's that whole part of, like, Gen X. They grew up that, like, if you have a difference of opinion, you can still be a family and you can, make jokes and have your own thing, but it just showed that everybody can live together. Not so much these days, but, that was really something that Michael J. Fox represented in the 80s.
Yeah, it was a really interesting time because the family was about the story was about a family that were like a bunch of hippies, a bunch of liberals. And then suddenly their son becomes this sort of Reagan Republican, which at the time was like, whoa. It not the type of like politics now, which are even more divided, but it was wild for them to have this son who wore a tie and wanted to make a lot of money, but he made it all very easy. He wasn't the craven, greedy guy. He was charming about it and winning. Yeah.
Your wife Elizabeth Shue was in Back to the Future 2 with him.
Yeah.
Did have
2 and 3.
2 and 3. Well, starting off with #2, had they been stayed in contact and friends since that time? Like, did you get to know Michael J. Fox for a long period of time, or did they kind of go their separate ways?
Not really.
No.
I mean, not even separate ways as much as that life gets busy. We raised our family in LA, and he raised his family in New York, and he's making his movies, and she's making her movies. But she always said what a great guy he was, and he always said that he was a better basketball player than him. Like my wife's a real athlete, so she was sinking 3-pointers on the set making Back to the Future 2.
Oh, exactly. And then, probably with Teen Wolf, he probably had to try to up his game, at that point, too, because people expected him to have
That's right.
certain skills.
That's exactly right.
Let's talk a little bit about his height, because Michael J. Fox and I are roughly about the same
right?
height.
Yeah.
But there's some of those challenges that you have, being a shorter guy.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about having Parkinson's, working really hard at his career, but him maybe kind of having that mentality of, like, I have to work through this. I don't know if that had an impact, or if you happen to see like his fighting spirit, because of that in what we see now.
That's kind of the reason I made the movie, is that he's got this incurable disease, but he refuses to let it bring him down. And I think maybe being short helped him with that. I've never said this before in an interview, but perhaps always having to prove himself. Maybe older kids bullying him. He talks about that. He's got to stand up and be strong. He's got to stand up and be positive and be funny to win people over. And so I think that's a big part of his identity that became sort of his secret sauce as an actor. And then weirdly, when he's got Parkinson's, that optimism, that desire to be he refuses to be pitied. He refuses to be the guy, with a disability. He wants to be optimistic. He wants to beat it, and that's what I think is so appealing about him in this movie.
When he came out during Spin City to say that he had Parkinson's, and it was a big thing at that time, and it still is now, because somebody in their late 20s, you don't expect them to make an announcement like that. But if it wasn't affecting him as physically as it was, do you think he would have kept it more of a secret until later?
What's remarkable about this story is that he got it when he was 29. At the height of his career. He's shooting Doc Hollywood in Florida, and he wakes up and his pinky's twitching. It's kind of shocking. And instead of doing the right thing, he does all the wrong things. He starts drinking too much. He pretends he doesn't have it. And he starts to work too much because he's panicked that he won't have that long of a career. But she's basically running away from this prognosis. and it's him finally facing it that becomes sort of like the great story of the movie.
I want to talk a little bit about Tracy Pollan because we got to see them as a couple on Family Ties, and sometimes I think everyone at home wishes, you see that dynamic on a TV show and hopes that the two characters happen to fall in love, and like it actually did happen.
Yeah.
And often, too many times, you read about somebody who has a certain diagnosis and the other person ends up with somebody else or leaving them.
Yeah.
And it just showed just the strength of the two of them staying together, being very vocal, and just kind of going about their normal lives. Talk a little bit about the magic and what's so special about their relationship that you got to see.
When people watch this movie, they always talk about Tracy. They always talk about what an amazing story that is of how they met. She played his girlfriend on Family Ties, and lo and behold, like after they finished, they did another movie together, and that's when they truly fell in love. And but she's just strong. She takes no prisoners. He's sort of the flamboyant kind of funny guy, but she's very strong and holds them together. And their family, you see the family in the movie. They're so loving, and they love their kids so much. And it's really fun. It's really not even fun. It's very inspiring to see them as a family.
Speaking of inspiration, I know I grew up in the 80s, and Family Ties was that very first show that my parents got to kind of moved away from cartoons, and your parents knew that you could sit there for 30 minutes and not have to be like, hey, get away from the TV, don't watch that. That was the first show that you got to watch as a family or you got to watch as a kid. And then Teen Wolf was like, oh my goodness, he's in a movie. It's about this. Back to the Future, and especially Back to the Future 2 with some Chicago aspects, to it, especially with the Cubs, was just like, it blew everybody's mind because this was, Harry Styles, whatever he may be right now, this was kind of what it was for that Gen X period. But let's talk a little bit about maybe having him live his life, live his truth, be vocal, share his story, what that impact does for so many people.
Well, I hope this movie has a tremendous amount of impact. I know he already has had impact because what he's done with the Fox Foundation, because he's this sort of, I think before Michael, Parkinson's was the disease that was sort of hidden. Like people were scared to go to work when they have it. And there was someone last night at a screening here in Chicago that went at work and he told everyone that he had Parkinson's. And everyone in the room started applauding because they were so proud of this coworker for saying that he has it. I think Michael's done a lot to bring Parkinson's out of the shadows and say, hey, I have it. I can still be a high-functioning person. He was on a lot of great TV shows. He's still such a great role model now that I think he's really insisted that we look at him through a different lens.
Was there any difficult part in filming the movie, kind of seeing his struggle and just kind of seeing somebody who you had in your mind of, here's how this person was in the 80s, in the 90s, even just a couple of years ago when Elizabeth and Christopher Lloyd and Michael J. Fox reunited with Josh Gad for that big reunion. I mean, he looks a lot different then than he does now.
I think it's a little shocking at first when you see him now.
Yeah.
We have a scene in the beginning of the movie where he's walking to his office, and he's really struggles to walk and not fall. And it's hard to see someone who you grew up in your living room being so, and he moves so well. Like that was one of the things in the Back to the Future where he slid across the hood of the DeLorean. To see him how he is now, I think it's really hard. But right away, you see that sparkle in his eye, and you forget about it because he's still so charismatic and funny. Like the best part of this movie is that there's so much laughter in it. There's so much joy in it. Even in the hard spots. There's like last night there was a scene, a really tough scene, and he just says it. He just cracks this joke, and everyone's laughing.
Oh, exactly. And you have that spirit, and I think whether someone's going through Parkinson's or any other challenge in their life, seeing this movie, showing you that doesn't necessarily define you and how you kind of create your own future. I think it's a tough thing for a lot of people, but he shows us there's actually a way to do that.
Sometimes when we, I feel this way a lot when you see someone who's got a sickness, you see someone who's down on their luck, you see a homeless person on the street, and you just go, oh, that's that. And we forget that they're human beings. And Michael's done a great job at saying, hey, look at me for who I am.
Siskel and Ebert had a big impact, especially at the beginning of his career.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about, especially at that moment where he was kind of going from TV shows to movies, and that impact, especially, I know you had Chaz Ebert's help in trying to find these archives.
Well, she was at the movie screening last night, and she's wonderful. Like, I called her up and was like, there's this one review from Back to the Future I can't find. She goes, I'll go to the vault. And she went down to the vault where I guess they keep the original copies of that. So she helped me find that footage. And it's hard to remember how important Siskel and Ebert were. If they gave you a thumbs up, people would go to your movie. If they gave you a thumbs down, they wouldn't go to the movie. They were that influential. Now there's so many websites, so many reviewers, so many people doing that stuff. But they had a tremendous influence. And you see in the movie the good reviews that Michael gets and the not so good.
Not so good ones later on.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Davis. Still a Michael J. Fox movie, Apple TV Plus, and
Opens May 12th.
opens May 12th. Thank you.
Thanks.